Welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast, where you'll find insight, analysis, and the story behind the numbers.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Business Line's State of the Economy podcast. Today, we have with us Dr. Akshay Singhal, who is the CEO and founder of Log9 Materials, a startup which is at the forefront of research and manufacturing of EV batteries in India. Now, armed with a doctorate in nanotechnology and a bachelor's degree with honors in materials engineering from IIT Roorkee, Akshay's mission is to solve problems related with electric mobility and clean energy storage across the tropical belt, beginning from India and stretching into Southeast Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America. Our Forbes Under 30 honoree, Akshay is also the recipient of the Young Entrepreneur Award 2020 from the Indian National Academy of Engineering. Rather than being known for his domain expertise in nanotechnology, Akshay wants to be recognized as the technologist who is putting an end to climate change. To this effect, he has mentored several startups addressing the issue. And if you look at Log9's efforts in accelerating clean energy transition, it has quite a few firsts to its credit. It developed India's first AI air fuel cell in 2018, then India's first lithium-ion cell research and innovation facility in 2022, and this year, Log9 established the country's first lithium-ion cell manufacturing facility. As all would agree that EVs will play a crucial role in India's efforts to decarbonize the transport and logistics sectors, which are the key consumers and polluters in the country. Now, the government and the industry are convinced that EVs accelerate the decarbonization of the logistics sector, particularly the last mile delivery. Akshay, with his deep knowledge, will help us understand the crucial role that EVs are playing in the logistics sector and how electric mobility can help in reducing carbon emissions, and also how Log9 is helping in accelerating the clean energy transition. Akshay, the first question to you would be, how would you describe the adoption of EVs in the logistics sector?
Hi, Rishi. Good to be on this podcast. Thank you very much for your invitation. So basically, if you look at EV transition and clean energy and clean mobility transition, right? So batteries become a very key piece, and that's the reason why we leveraged our entire materials and our technology expertise to create the most efficient batteries for our ecosystem. And it becomes important from that perspective that all the battery technologies that have been created globally, right, they were never created keeping the Indian or the global south or tropical conditions in mind. And that's the reason we have seen so many of these EV fires and battery fires and lack of performance, faster degradation of batteries and batteries going bad and needing replacement so quickly. It is something which has started to accelerate over here in our operating conditions, which includes very high temperature profile that we have in the global south. At the same time, the vehicle platforms are very different. Like the two-wheeler, three-wheeler, small four-wheelers are very unique to the Indian ecosystem or the tropical ecosystem in that regard, and stretching across Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America, and this belt. So it required somebody to really take up the mantle in developing battery technologies from ground up, right from the materials level to cell level to battery packs and downstream management, to be able to provide a holistic solution. And that's what Log9 has kind of achieved and is pioneering this entire transition in the country. To your question as to how it helps solve climate change and how this deployment across last mile is very beneficial. So if you look at EVs from a perspective of climate change, right, and that's the primary reason why we are trying to electrify mobility. What gets missed out in the race to become the dominant player in the EV ecosystem is that really creating that positive climate impact? Is it really saving those carbon emissions when we deploy EVs on the road? And the only place where it does make sense right now is in the last mile segment. Because if you look at an electric vehicle, both from its perspective of lower cost for the customer, as well as from its perspective of lower carbon emissions in an aggregate form, an EV only makes sense in the commercial use, whether it is a use for last mile or long haul or any of commercial utility application, because the commercial utility applications provide you the real and the long utilization or the heavy duty utilization, more number of kilometers per month, which a personal use case electric vehicle or application never provides. And this is because the upfront cost of electric vehicle is higher. At the same time, the upfront carbon emissions that happen during the manufacturing process of the battery and the EV are significantly higher than making a fuel-based vehicle. And it's only the running emissions which are lower and the running costs which are lower. So it takes a while before you hit parity on both the cost perspective as well as the climate perspective. And hence we ourselves said that it makes more sense to electrify the last mile segment first, where the platforms have got maturity as well as the utilization is high enough.
That's a very concise way to put it. Akshay, you've been in this the EVs and the battery space for since 2015 when Log9 was incubated at IIT Roorkee. Since then, how will you describe the policies that center and the states have devised or have brought out for adoption of electric vehicles? And particularly adoption of electric vehicles in the logistics sector. What has your experience been in almost these odd 8 years?
No, I think the policy, as far as the policy framework or the intent from the government side is concerned, it is very much aligned to enable transition and a swift transition as well as smooth transition towards electric vehicles. Also, while that intent is there, there's action on ground. Right, in terms of basically bringing out the FAME policy, bringing out manufacturing incentives, providing support in terms of being able to set up manufacturing and provide incentives for that. That is there. One gap which is there from the perspective of the government or the support from the government is not particularly from the policy perspective, but the execution perspective. So where the actual downstream machinery comes in play and you are able to access these benefits and really leverage them in a quicker manner, that is something where I think more optimization is required. While we have these various FAME policy, the PLI scheme, and the various other incentives from the government side, getting access to them and having a very swift, so to say, ability to avail them is something which is still needs to be optimized to a large extent.
Well, that's a great observation. I'll tell you why, because before you joined, I and my colleague Anjana is from Kerala, and we were discussing, and she was talking about that in Kerala, a lot of people want EVs. But those anxieties about battery, the public charging structures, they're still to come up. So she said that a lot of people want it, but these are the things which hinder adoption. You now have a much better insight than many of us. How do you think this can public charging stations, charging infrastructure can be accelerated so that adoption can happen? Because this is a costly exercise. It's a costly endeavor. It would require a lot of transmission capacities to be ramped up. Do you think something can be done to fast track it?
See, as far as a new sector is concerned and where we are feeling or seeing the challenge, right, is that while a lot of subsidies, a lot of incentives are being provided by the government. For example, you mentioned about charging infra itself, right? So government had spent considerable amount of money on facilitating charging infra and putting it up. Even government PSU offices have really put up charging infra. What happens is that understanding and that ability to kind of be dynamic and pragmatic about it is just not there in the government machinery, right? And where we have seen significant misses in terms of where those chargers were put. Once it was put as a part of the government scheme, was it even maintained? Was it even available for charging, right? Just putting up a charger doesn't suffice. You have to make sure that it is running and it is continuously being monitored, that there is no theft, there is no, so to say, mishandling of the charger. At the same time, it is available for the next customer, right? So those things become challenging for a government machinery to run. And again, the charging point itself, if I go further, right, the time it takes to set up a charger, right, from the perspective of getting the power connection from the discom itself, availability of power, the lines being drawn and all of it, it's a very, very long stretch process. And why? So as I mentioned, right, while the intent is there on the top, there has to be ways in which we can kind of incentivize or we can make the process more smooth and more swift in the downstream execution. So policies from an incentive perspective might be good, intent might be good, but execution level policies are something where we have missed quite a bit. One option on that side is, and which has worked, is where the government has worked with private players to be able to manage and run that, where the onus of managing and running and offering those services is on the private player, is something which has worked better.
The third question that I wanted to put to you, before that, I wanted to draw your attention to, in 2020, you developed the Rapidex battery for three-wheelers. And in the same way, you launched what you said was India's fastest charging electric three-wheeler. Sorry, it's in 2021. I'm sorry. And this is three-wheelers are a key part of the logistics supply chain. What are the issues that logistics companies face when they look at adoption of EVs? Though I do see in our neighborhoods the big baskets and Zomato and all using electric two-wheelers, but there are a lot of issues that logistic companies face. What, according to you, are those issues?
So there were a couple of issues which existed, which have been, so to say, solved or improved upon by launches from our side and the overall growth of the ecosystem. And there are some issues that continue to persist, right? So I'll talk about both. Right. So when we started to launch our products in the market, one of the biggest challenge that we realized was the reliability of the battery and the vehicle itself. Right. As I mentioned, these batteries were never designed or developed to operate in Indian conditions. And that's the reason they were failing very, very quickly. Right. Unlike the personal use case where the utilization of the battery is or the vehicle is very less, it was not that evident. But moment commercial segment started to adopt electric vehicles and they were trying to kind of really run it more as much as they could, right? They saw batteries not even lasting for 1.5, 2 years. And there were a lot of issues in terms of they randomly failing on the road because the temperature got too high. So the battery stopped working. There was a lot of performance issues in terms of load bearing capacity and stuff like that. So those are the issues which were really kind of making people shy away from adopting EVs or increasing the mix of EVs in their fleets. So that's when we launched the Rapidex batteries, there was a huge, so to say, adoption and traction as well as customer love that we were able to get because the downtime of the vehicle was reduced. So the vehicle did not need to spend 4 or 5 hours of charging time every time it got discharged, and hence it could spend more time on the road. Secondly, there was consistency across temperature profiles that we were able to offer. So it didn't matter if it was too cold in the winters in the north or it was too hot in the summers. It didn't really matter, and the vehicle performed the same. Right. And at the same time, for the first time, we were able to offer warranties, which were as long as 10 years plus with unlimited number of kilometers. So that gave a lot of confidence to the customer that whatever they're investing in is going to last as much as long as the vehicle will last. And if not that, more than the vehicle itself. So that kind of brought back that confidence into transitioning to EVs. So those are challenges which existed. Now, what challenges still exist, right? So many, so to say, companies or products out there in the market are purely built from a perspective of making a product and selling it and forgetting about it, which doesn't work in the EV scenario because the whole methodology or the behavior change that is required is quite high. If you look at a normal fuel-based three-wheeler, we were talking about three-wheelers, right? If I take that example itself, in the fuel-based three-wheeler, the upfront cost of the vehicle is quite low and the running cost of the vehicle is higher, right? So that doesn't require the entire vehicle to be maximized in terms of utilization to be able to make up for the total cost of ownership per kilometer, bring down the cost per kilometer in that sense. Whereas in the EV case, it's totally reverse, right? The upfront cost of the vehicle is higher and the running cost is very, very marginal. So if you really want to make the unit economics work in terms of the cost per kilometer, you have to maximize the utilization. The vehicle has to be used across multiple shifts and the vehicle has to be used 22 hours plus in a day. And that is something where it requires handholding. And that's what we were able to offer in the market, wherein we didn't just launch the most efficient and the most highest performing batteries, but we also offered an entire network which was a mix of digital services and on-ground physical services to the end customer, which enabled them to figure out where they can charge these vehicles, what is the availability of those charging sessions, how is the vehicle performing, how is the charging happening, what is the energy efficiency, and how much the vehicle is being used. So if there is a customer which has 100 vehicles or 200 vehicles, 500 vehicles in a fleet, how many of these vehicles are being used more and why, and how many are being used less, and which drivers are able to run these vehicles in the most efficient manner. So all that visibility and handholding and support in maintaining high utilization, high energy efficiency, at the same time reliability on the vehicle as it's being used in the field became very, very important.
Akshay, one small supplementary question, just for understanding sakes. that a lot of times we hear people when we talk about EVs that the battery costs around 40 to 50% of the total cost of an electric vehicle. So a lot of people have this notion in their mind that in the next 7 to 8 years, when the battery life cycle ends, you'll have to replace it, and the cost will be staggering, which also sort of hinders their decision to go for an electric vehicle. Does the and it's in the personal space. Does the same thing plays out in the logistics space? Does a logistic player also look at such scenarios?
Even more so, because that failure which is happening, let's say in a personal use case in 4 or 5 years time period, in the commercial use case will start to happen in 1.5 2 years. That's the reason it becomes very important to have long life batteries available to the market. Because if you look at it, the commercial customer, or the so to say last mile customer for that matter, right, their ability to be able to finance a battery replacement is significantly lower than a personal customer. Because in a B2C use case, automotive use case, the financing happens on the credit rating of the user and not so much on the vehicle itself, right? As long as your finances work well and you have a consistent income, right, finance is available. Whereas a driver who is running a three-wheeler, right, he doesn't have a credit history, he doesn't have a credit score, right? So all the financing is purely based on the asset value. And if you imagine that, a battery failing after 2 years leads to an asset value of zero, because it's a commercial use case. So the vehicle without the battery, without a running battery, is of really no value, and hence no financier will be able to provide money for replacing the battery pack itself. So it was a far bigger and a graver challenge in the commercial use case as compared to the B2C use case.
If I'm not wrong, I read it. I think I read it some time back. You had some option of financing of batteries. I'm not sure, but I think I read it somewhere. I'm not sure what.
So there are two solutions to the,
Yeah.
we have brought in two solutions on this regard. One is that increase the life to more than the life of the vehicle itself. Right? That basically means that in the life of the vehicle, no matter how much you use it, and we actually motivate people to use it more as much as they can, right? There will be no requirement for a battery replacement. That is one. And secondly, because these batteries were such long-lasting assets, we were able to provide that information, data, support, and confidence to the financiers, wherein they were able to give us very attractive financing options, which enabled the customer to avail these vehicles at a very competitive and a cheaper cost.
So now the larger we've discussed the industry. Just before we go into how you are helping and accelerate the transition, right now, how big is the industry right now? And I know that it has great prospects, but how do you see it growing in the next 2 to 3 years?
See, the size of our industry is significantly smaller as compared to the developed markets like US, Europe, China at this point of time, right? If you look at today, we have about talk in terms of kilowatt hours, megawatt hours, gigawatt hours in terms of battery capacities and all of that. Like today, the world has 1,000 gigawatt hours or 1 terawatt hour of battery production capacity thereabouts. Whereas India's total consumption on an annual basis right now is sub 2 gigawatt hours. So we are very small consumer at this point of time, which is a challenge in terms of having leverage of procurement, in terms of having the best cost availability, and in terms of people globally wanting to customize and modify technologies for Indian use cases. Having said that, it is also an opportunity. And the opportunity lies that because the market is smaller but it is rapidly growing, local companies like, for example, Log9 itself have an opportunity to grow with the ecosystem, build technologies and products which are very, very tuned and aligned to the requirements over here, and ensure that as we go to a larger and larger size of this market, we have completely indigenized product availability, supply chains, and we are Atmanirbhar in that sense, right? So that is, it's a challenge, but a very big opportunity at the same time, and that's what we're gunning for. But as I said, right, while we are at 2 gigawatt hours kind of a requirement today, that's not going to be the case when we look at 2030. So within the next 5-7 years itself, we are looking at going from 2 gigawatt hours to up to 300 gigawatt hours of battery requirements in the country. And hence, it's a very large opportunity where we are trying to lead the curve and really pioneer this entire sector in India.
Just a supplementary question, and it arises from when you speak about this need for Atmanirbharta or self-reliance. This is around 5 years back. Chile was looking forward of having strong linkages with India for lithium. And why I'm bringing it, because post that we lost that thing and China moved in. Now, if you look at Indian government, the government is going for lithium, but there's also a narrative where we are saying that we need to look for and develop other chemistries which can substitute for lithium. Raising this question, just if you could build a perspective around this whole scenario, that I can understand lithium is chemical chart at 40 in terms of abundance. So there's abundance, processing is a problem. So if you could put a perspective to it, how much would we need, alternate chemistries to support the growing transition? Would lithium be enough, or the processing facilities are not enough? Because just some time back you have partnered with Loham for battery recycling, which sort of helps to accelerate the transition. So if you could give us a perspective on this.
I'll start with actually a TV series which recently, in a few years back, came in, right? And it was about ISRO's mission to Mars, right? It was called MOM, Mission Over Mars, which came around, right? And there was a line in that where they were struggling to get access to funds to be able to kind of manage the entire cost of that mission, right? And the character in that mentioned that there is a huge disparity between India's aspirations and India's resources and availability of resources in that sense, and that's true across sectors, right? So while we do have an aspiration of doing it on our own and doing it in a manner where it is scalable, where it is, and we try to kind of solve for all problems at once, right? The availability of resources, the capital depths of our financial markets, and the availability of capital itself is something which is definitely not as high as US, Europe, or China in that sense. And that's where we have a biggest challenge. Also, at the same time, our whole, so to say, population and the amount of people who are trying to solve problems, definitely different people come up with different ideas. So there's also a lot of different things that can be done, and not everything can receive capital. So it's a more fundamental problem in terms of where all we can have resources deployed and what all can be done in the limited resources that we have, right? But what we have very strong is an aspiration to go forward, and that's what propels India in the right direction. Having said that, in the context of batteries and lithium ion versus future technologies, one thing that we should keep in mind is we have to look at both short-term and long-term plans, right? If you look at technologies, for example, we keep on talking about sodium ion, keep on talking about other possible options, right? Those technologies would require maturity over the next 7-10 years to really compete with lithium ion. They might have a potential of being better in terms of cost economics than lithium ion itself and availability of raw materials, but it's not here and now. It is something which is significantly out there in the future. And in that case, securing availability of materials and availability of technology and having capacity of production becomes very, very imminent, because you cannot really, again, keep on waiting. So we have to target both sides while we are developing technologies which can be more beneficial from a cost economics perspective tomorrow. At the same time, we have to ensure that we have significant control and leverage on the technology and which already are there in the market. So that's the approach I would take on this entire situation.
So Akshay, as you articulate the strengths and weaknesses of this transition using electric vehicles, when you conceptualized Log9, what was the driving theme, and right now, where does Log9 stand?
See, and I'll take that example. Very good question, Rishi. So as you mentioned, right, our first foray into battery space was with the aluminum fuel cell technology, right? And that technology, again, in the same context, was more fundamental. A newer technology needs a lot of capital in R&D and research and maturity and time for it, right? That's the reason why we were able to say that, okay, aluminum fuel cell, it also requires a small lithium-ion battery pack to function in the proper way. And that pack that you've designed itself has a market today, and it can really solve problems in the last mile segment. And that's how we forayed into offering lithium-ion technology and then really kind of pioneered that entire space for the last 4 years. So that is something which becomes important, right? In India, unlike US, if I give you the example of US, for example, right, any battery startup or company, right, the first 100, 200 crores come from the government free of cost, right? In terms of grants, in terms of subsidies, in terms of available support from Department of Energy or other government schemes over there. We don't have that capital depth in our country, right? So if a company has to really aspire to bring in newer technologies, which Log9 does, there also has to be an immediate product which can go out there in the market, solve current challenges, earn revenue, and that revenue kind of helps you get enough support, whether from the debt markets or the equity markets, to be able to build technologies for the future. So that is where there's a significant difference in the way startups are building up in the US market or the European market on the battery side or the EV side, and versus where how it is shaping up in the Indian context.
Right. So now we have you've come out with your manufacturing facility. Akshay, what are your plans? How do you intend to chart Log9 ahead? If you could share your plans, or how are you thinking to move ahead? Your manufacturing facility has come up. So what next can we expect? What are the products? If you could share this with our listeners.
Certainly. So basically, in 2021, as you rightly mentioned, we started with battery offerings for the three-wheeler segment. Then we have expanded to two-wheeler segment and four-wheeler segment. Continue to be in the commercial utility space, so two-wheeler for food delivery, e-commerce deliveries, three-wheeler anyway being a commercial segment, four-wheeler cargo vehicles for deliveries and mid-mile and all of that. So that's something which we are continuing to expand our portfolio for commercial use case of mobility. So 2, 3, four-wheeler, and then industrial equipments like forklifts and tow trucks, and then various other industrial applications, and going eventually entering into the other commercial user segments, like, for example, larger trucks and buses and stuff like that. So that is one expansion route. Secondly, obviously expanding our manufacturing capability. So we have been able to grow our battery pack manufacturing capacity from 40 megawatt hours that we started with in 2021 to 250 megawatt hours today, which is a significant jump within a period of 2 years. We have expanded it 5 times, and we are bringing a lot of automation and improve the process and efficiency of manufacturing it. And the cell line that you mentioned, the lithium-ion cell line that we have established this year. So we're continuing to scale the process on that cell manufacturing line, optimize the cost of manufacturing on that side, and improve technology, right? So one of the key aspects of building better products and more, so to say, viable products for the Indian ecosystem means that something which works better in our operating conditions. So how do we increase the temperature resilience? How do we ensure that in the same amount of materials we can put in more energy? So basically increasing the energy efficiency and the energy capacity of these cells and batteries going out there. So those are the various aspects that we are expanding on and constantly ramping up our manufacturing capability as we go forward.
What you're talking about ramping up your capacities. So what are there targets, or if you could give us more insights into that?
Yeah, so basically, if you look at our battery pack capacity, so we are targeting to take it to 2 gigawatt hours kind of manufacturing capacity within the next 15 to 18 months time period. So that is something which will continue to scale. Even on the cell manufacturing side, today we have a 50 megawatt hour manufacturing setup that we have, which needs to be expanded to a gigawatt hour capacity. So a couple of gigawatt hours is what we are planning to do in the next 2.5 years time period. And that would be like this is the first facility. It will be that the one that will set up will be the first in India, or if not at all the first, then at least first of one of first 3.
Okay. So Akshay, you spoke about how finances have been an issue. How are you dealing with it?
So I think what helped us is, again, as I mentioned, cracking a faster go-to market, right? A pure technology startup or a venture in India doesn't really work. We don't have the understanding and the depths of the capital market to support that. But if you are already launched, if you already have the revenue cycles running for you out there, helps in attracting capital in the Indian ecosystem. And that's what we have done.
So, in the past 2-3 years, we've seen quite promising companies like Nykaa and others coming in, having IPOs. All those things also, you're considering such options to raise, because increasing scale to 2 gigawatt hours is quite an endeavor in 15 to 18 months, as you say. That would require ensure quite a substantial capital cost. So how do you plan to, raise finances for these expansions that you're talking about?
So it will be a mix of equity investment into the company and debt and all of that coming in for the time being. But definitely, target for us is the public listing. But that has to be in line with achieving significant profitability and a scale of the business. Right, a premature public listing also is not good for the retail general investor and the startup's case. So the idea is not to really go into a premature public kind of really make everybody lose money. But rather we build the foundation very strong. We reach to a significant scale of hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue.
Yeah.
Ability and a very viable profitability system, as I think would be the right stage for a public listing.
Yeah. Thank you, Akshay. Thank you for such painstakingly breaking down these technical and important jargons for us, and thank you for your patience and being here speaking with us. Thank you so much for your time, and
Thank you much.
have a good day.
Thank you.